Well, today, one of the people who follows me on Twitter, Patricia McClary, tweeted, "If you talk about Omarosa tonight, when there are 700 children still separated from their parents, then I will turn you off." But Omarosa is one of the reasons that those children were separated from their parents and are still separated from their parents tonight. Those children were separated because of the cruelty of the people working in the Trump White House, especially the president, who thought it was a good idea to separate them. Omarosa and everyone else working for the Trump presidential campaign knew they were supporting a candidate who believed that the one thing that we didn't have enough of on the southern border was cruelty. That cruelty was going to be one of the methods that Donald Trump would use at the southern border to discourage immigration. Omarosa knew that. All of the Trump campaign workers knew that. And now Omarosa proceeds with her TV interview version of her Nuremberg trial. As she does that, she wants to use the defense the world heard frequently during the Nuremberg trials of Nazis after World War II. I didn't know. I didn't know Donald Trump was a racist, she says, and now I do. 7 years ago, when Donald Trump started talking about Barack Obama's birth certificate, I said right here on this program at this hour that he is a racist. I did not know Donald Trump. I had never met Donald Trump. And I knew he was a racist because I listened to the racist things he very happily said in public then. Now, Omarosa tells us that Donald Trump told her then that he wasn't being racist when he was lying about President Obama's birth. He was just using it as a political device. Omarosa wasn't the only one who refused to call Donald Trump a racist 7 years ago. Virtually the entire political news media held their fire back then and begged Donald Trump to do another TV interview talking about the Obama birth certificate because those interviews were good for ratings. And so the Omarosa story is about what it means to be complicit and how many people in how many places are complicit in the cruelty and incompetence of the Trump White House and the Trump administration, and how they all must at some level know that they are complicit, no matter what they're willing to say now.
Yes, it is hindsight, but I will say this to you. I was complicit with this White House deceiving this nation. They continue to deceive this nation by how mentally declined he is, how difficult it is for him to process complex information, how he is not engaged in some of the most important decisions that impacts our country. I was complicit, and for that, I regret.
They are all going to have their Omarosa moment. At some point, they will all eventually disown Trump, just as all the Republicans working for Richard Nixon eventually disowned Nixon in some way. Their Omarosa moment might not be as melodramatic, but it will come. Even Sean Spicer, who has chosen the opposite course and written an utterly ridiculous memoir of his time in Trump world, working for the most incompetent and ignorant president in history, Sean Spicer couldn't find a negative word to say about the president because he still works for the president on a Trump-controlled Republican political payroll. But Sean Spicer's day will come when he, too, will seek the comfort of acceptance by the majority of Americans instead of their scorn, and he will do that by turning against Donald Trump in some way, just like they all turned against Richard Nixon. The one unifying characteristic that everyone working in the Trump White House shares is that not one of them would be employed by any other White House, any other president in the jobs they have now. And that is because every one of them is the most incompetent person who has ever held the job they are currently holding, from White House Chief of Staff Kelly on down.
So the staff and everyone on the staff works for me, not the president.
That is from Omarosa's secret audio recording of her session with John Kelly when he fired her. So the delusionally incompetent John Kelly believes that Ivanka Trump works for him, that Jared Kushner works for him, that the White House press secretary works for John Kelly. Of course, no one in the Trump White House works for John Kelly. No one. John Kelly is not allowed to hire or fire anyone without Donald Trump's approval. And because John Kelly is an even more incompetent chief of staff than his predecessor, Reince Priebus, the Trump White House has become even more out of control in the time that John Kelly has been pretending that the White House staff works for him. The president, who has never found the time to explain how he will mastermind the reuniting of the children who he separated from their parents at the southern border, has found plenty of time to attack Omarosa on Twitter. And one of his tweets, he said, he knows it's not presidential to be attacking Omarosa, but he doesn't seem to realize that it was not presidential to hire her. No other White House staffer in history has ever written a memoir using secret recordings that she made of the president and others, because people like Omarosa could never get in the door of any other White House. While other presidential transition teams searched for excellence to staff the White House, it seems the Trump transition team was searching for nothing but incompetence. And so Omarosa went to work in the White House, along with people like Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller is one of the biggest cheerleaders of ripping babies out of their mother's arms in the Trump White House. It might be a tie between Stephen Miller and John Kelly as to who is more enthusiastic about separating families at the southern border in the Trump White House. And today in Politico, Stephen Miller's uncle, David Glosser, published an eloquent essay in which he said, "I have watched with dismay and increasing horror as my nephew, an educated man who is well aware of his heritage, has become the architect of immigration policies that repudiate the very foundation of our family's life in this country." Stephen Miller's uncle pointed out that Stephen Miller might not exist today, and certainly would not be living in the United States if his family was not allowed to enter the United States in the early 20th century as Jewish refugees from life-threatening persecution in Eastern Europe. Stephen Miller is the product of what Stephen Miller condemns as chain migration. Donald Trump is also the product of what he condemns as chain migration. Stephen Miller's uncle wrote that Stephen Miller and Donald Trump have become, quote, blind to the hypocrisy of their policy decisions. But in government, where policy decisions affect the real lives of millions of real people and can create extreme suffering in those people's lives, hypocrisy can be a lesser sin than incompetence. Consider your airline pilot the next time you're on a plane. Would you be more bothered by her hypocrisy or her incompetence? Only one of those things can actually kill you. And so, yes, the policy of separating parents and children at the southern border was hypocritical for Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and for John Kelly, who was also the product of what he condemns as chain migration. But their greater sin is incompetence, and it is what will always unite them with Omarosa, who will be, at best, a footnote in historians' account of the Trump administration, because she never actually made anything happen in the Trump administration. She was, by her own account now, essentially just pure tokenism, the black person the racist had to have on the payroll and in the room to try to prove that he is not a racist. She was an enabler and a defender of the president she now calls racist, but no one cared what she thought about the policies. No one inside the White House did, if she thought anything at all about the policies. Thinking up the Trump policies and then executing the Trump policies fell to other incompetence in the Trump White House. Steve Bannon, John Kelly, Stephen Miller on immigration, and the incompetent Trump cabinet on that and other policies. Who can forget Donald Trump's Homeland Security Secretary in her confirmation hearing lying under oath about Norway?
Norway is a predominantly white country, isn't it?
I actually do not know that, sir, but I imagine that is the case.
Her white immigrant ancestors are from Scandinavia, and she actually pretended to know nothing about Scandinavia under oath, which is a level of incompetence that is hard to believe, even from a Trump Secretary of Homeland Security. And so tonight, Omarosa stands accused of incompetence, not just by those of us who always knew She did not have the competence to work in the White House, but by the president who hired her to work in the White House, the president who promised his supporters that he would not hire people like the person he has spent all day attacking.
We've got the best people.
I know the best people.
We're going to use our best people. The best people.
The best people. I know guys that are so good.
It's hard to rank the importance of the lies candidate Trump told, but the lie about the best people is actually one of the most important lies that Donald Trump told on the campaign trail, because in some jobs, incompetence can kill. Incompetence can destroy lives in some government jobs. And so Omarosa is today's window into the cruelty and incompetence of the Trump White House and the Trump administration. It was the hypocrisy and the cruelty and incompetence of Donald Trump and John Kelly and Stephen Miller that ripped babies out of the arms of their mothers on the southern border. And it is their rank incompetence that keeps 559 of those children still separated from their parents tonight. The Trump administration has admitted that they don't know how to reunite those families. They don't know how. And so tonight, in an administration where the only cabinet members who have publicly demonstrated any kind of real competence, our Secretary of Defense Mattis and Director of National Security Coates, we are living with the cruelty of malice and incompetence of the Trump administration. They are all Omarosa. Donald Trump is Omarosa. And everyone working for him in that White House is Omarosa. When we come back after this break, we'll be joined by Michael Steele, Yamiche Alcindor, and Tim O'Brien, who will consider what all of this means, not for Omarosa, but for all of the other Omarosas still working in the White House, very much including Donald Trump. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.